your phone message, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another camera class. Today is the second Thursday of the month, which will be intermediate cameras. My name is Saxon, your host. I'll be teaching the class today. Last week, we didn't meet on Thursday. Instead, we met on Monday, March 31st, because I was out of town. But today, we're back to our normal Thursday schedule. Today we are going over intermediate camera knowledge. So now we're trying to get more advanced. We're getting away from our automatic settings and getting into full manual control. We're going to learn the difference between taking a snapshot versus a photograph. We're going to talk about things like aperture, shutter, ISO, and some of the more advanced controls you can use on your mirrorless or DSLR camera, and even some of your point and shoot models that you might have. Anybody has any questions during the class, by all means interrupt and ask questions as you see. Anybody online watching, feel free to chat or ask questions. I'll answer them live on the video. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, I like to start with, why do we go more advanced for a point and shoot, a DSLR, or a mirrorless camera? Why not just stick to the automatic? The way I like to say this is that cameras are tools. They're meant to be a piece of equipment that we can use to get something or manipulate things in a way to give us the final result we want. Whether that's something that we do editing in Photoshop or in post, or whether that's the settings that we imbue on our camera in order to get the image that we want and to get the clarity or definition that we want, we go more advanced to become more one with the unit, to understand the intricacies, the ins and outs of the product, just so we have a better overall understanding rather than just pointing and shooting the camera. Modern day cameras, they work very well in the automatic setting, much better than cameras of years past worked. However, we still want to know how to use our product to its full capabilities so we know what we're getting out of it as the end result. I like to show this as a very beginning kind of part of the class. The way I look at this is the difference between a snapshot and a photograph. To me, a snapshot is a quick image, it's something you're taking, you're not really thinking too hard on. You're just pointing the camera and shooting. Whereas a photograph is something that you might play with the settings, and you might play with the different dials and modes on your camera in order to manipulate the photo to look a certain type of way. So using my camera, I had my aspect ratio at a certain square kind of image. I took a quick picture of our escalators going up on the south end of our store, or north end of our store. I then went into manual control and took this picture. All I did on this was change things like aperture, shutter, ISO. I played with my light metering, my aspect ratio, my focus parameters. I manipulated the camera's various settings in order to get an image that looked and spoke a little bit more sophisticated than my snapshot. So again, using my camera's basic and rudimentary image quality, I took a picture like this, and then manipulating the camera's settings and features, I was then able to take a photo like this. That's what we're really trying to get after today, is how can we go from shooting automatic into something that might look more like this, or just in general, how we can move into something that's more advanced or a little bit more thought out and personal. Step 1, learn your camera. Since I started teaching this class about 2 years ago, there are now at least 7 to 8 new models on each of these camera series. Every year, these camera brands put out a new product or multiple new products, so it's important that whatever you have and whatever you're shooting with, you fully learn and grasp what all this does. There's a lot of right answers and there's a lot of wrong answers, but there's a lot of information in general out there about these cameras that it's important that you as a photographer learn and take notes of, so you know how to use and how to get to certain places. Now, I talked last week about different buttons and dials on our camera. The mode dial I refer to as like the gear shift of your car. It's your ability to go from park, neutral, reverse to drive. And the mode dial of a camera is no different. It's the deciding factor that you switch to one of these settings on your camera, and the camera will then function under that setting. Last week I talked mainly about automatic. I recommend it strongly that as a beginning photographer, you should stick on the automatic settings to learn the proper way to use how the camera shoots. You should focus on just using your eye to take good photos, clean photos, how to frame things, simple things that then can go a long way. But now I want to break away from the automatic setting and teach you a little bit more about some of the advanced settings. So again, your steps or your next steps should start with automatic. When you feel comfortable with automatic, program auto. It might also just say P exists on your camera. That gives you the ability to just switch certain small settings. That could be white balance, focus parameters, video or photo, JPEG or RAW, light metering. There's a ton of different things that can be changed without necessarily sacrificing that automatic photo quality that you're already getting in auto. Aperture priority and shutter priority rely on the one feature that it's named after. We're going to go over what those exactly mean in the next few slides. But aperture priority has to do with the aperture of the camera, and the shutter deals with just the shutter of the camera. The rest of the camera then fires automatically. Full manual is where you take those two priorities and mix them together, and now you're getting something that allows you full total access and control over the various settings, numbers, and things that the camera has to offer. The exposure triangle is going to be the most important portion of what we're really talking about today, and it's going to be the main bread and butter of what we're talking about today. The exposure triangle has three different options on there: aperture, shutter, and ISO. And a lot of the times you'll see this lined up in a way that looks like a pyramid. I don't necessarily like that, only because it kind of shows that if you go this way, then this way, then that way, where I think that all three of these entities are separate in their own right, but come together and mix and match as you start to learn how to fire and take things properly on your camera. Which that comes with practice and just you making an effort to understand what you're doing. There is no one right or wrong answer. And we're going to look at images to understand what I'm talking about as we move forward. Let's start with our aperture priority. Aperture is going to be the control of the iris of the camera. The aperture controls how much light you're letting into the camera, but also your foreground to background separation of an item or object. In the case of f/22, we have a little pinhole for where our aperture is. f/22 is showing us our background and our foreground. So the person waving and the pyramids in the background. However, not a lot of light is coming into the camera, so we have to be very cautious of that and understand that we might have to readjust settings or change other things if we're not shooting in aperture priority. Because if we're in aperture priority, the camera's going to do most of the work there for us. All we're doing is deciding what the aperture should be. As we move from f/22 down, we can see that the background gets blurrier and blurrier. That's because now we're raising our iris. We're opening it up wider. So now as you can see next to the numbers, that circle, that white little circle is getting smaller or bigger and bigger and bigger until it's the whole thing. By doing that, we're blurring out the background and causing more attention to the foreground. Why that matters is because that's our foreground to background separation in action. That's our ability to isolate one part of the photo and not have all of the clutter or the distraction of the rest of the photo involved. It's also our chance to let the most amount of light into the camera, giving us the best image or possibly the most amount of light, which could then also lead to a better image that's possible. To show an example of that, I have these. So, start with the dog nose. On the left-hand side, you have the dog's nose in full focus, but you have another dog behind it that is slightly blurred out. We can tell that's a dog, but we can't really make out its finer features. The one I always gravitate towards is where is its eyes looking? It probably is looking towards us, or whoever is, right behind or next to the camera. However, they could be looking anywhere. We don't have the whites of the eyes and pupils like we do the dog in the front. So if we revert back to our chart, we're probably somewhere between an f8 and possibly an f11. Background's blurry, we can make out what it is exactly, but we can't necessarily see the finer details. Not like we can with 16 and 22. Next to that, we have the squirrel. We can see the greenery, the trees, kind of all the stuff that this is going around with, just from the little bit of the image that we do have access to. However, we have a whole background that's a sea of green. Most likely it's more trees, nature, stuff of that kind. However, we can't make out the finer details of leaf shapes. Is it more evergreen trees? Is it a bush? Is it just a bunch of shrubs or plants? We don't know. But we can make an educated guess based on it. But the artist who took this photo is mainly probably focusing on the squirrel eating the nuts, standing on top of the branch looking cute. If that's the case, and we look back, well, now we're probably closer to that 2.82 or 1.4 on the very bottom, where the most of the background is blurred out. We have some sort of resemblance of it, but for the most part, we can't see with great detail what that is. Again, more visualization to understand what we're talking about here. On the left side, we have a nice deep image that's closer to probably the f22. We can see that the dog is darker on the one side of the line than the other side. But we can also see how much more information we have behind the dog of the trees, the shrubbery, the greenery, everything. Now in the shallow area, the dog's fur is much lighter, comes out cleaner. However, the background is so blurred out that we can't really see the finer details. Why use aperture priority mode? I like this image a lot. I think it kind of sums it up really well. Think about it this way. If you're on vacation with your wife, sisters, spouse, girlfriend, cousin, whatever it might be to you, and they want to take a photo like this, they probably want the background behind them, because look at how beautiful the background is. A gorgeous sunset, what seems to be a cove area with a sandy beach where the water's coming in, a town in the back coast, gorgeous white wave marks on there, moss and other different types of bacteria, but like mold on the rocks themselves. Just really cool coloration and beauty all around on this photo. You probably want to show all this off in the picture. However, let's say she was standing against a blank wall, didn't want the wall, just wanted her, then you might want to use aperture to blur everything else out but the subject matter. That is the beauty of aperture priority mode, is that you don't have to necessarily sit there and customize everything. You just have to choose and pick certain things that will help you benefit, or your photo benefit from whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're mainly taking portraits and there's not a lot of moving objects, or fast moving objects I should say, aperture priority is probably going to be just enough for you to get the job done. Shutter priority is now a flip-flop. So if aperture is about bringing light in and separating the foreground to the background, shutter is about capturing movement and freezing it within that photo. At the faster speed, which the higher the number, typically the faster the speed, 1 in 500th of a second, we catch the running man in full focus and in full frame. As we start to slow our shutter down though, we are now getting a blurry image. Now why is that? It's because of the fact that the movement of the person or the object is so fast that it doesn't allow for our camera to get a still image. You can see that by the time we get down to half a second, The person who's running at the same exact pace now looks as if they are blurry or there's multitudes of this person, when in reality, it's not the case. To freeze action, if we're looking at things like sports, in this case surfing, 1/1000th or faster is going to be the object of our shutter speed. If we can aim for something around there, we're going to slowly image down and get a freeze frame on the photo. And we can see that clearly with our surfer figure. We can capture the whites of the water, the splashes everywhere, just that whole kind of iconic nature of what surfing is. However, though, if we don't catch it perfectly like we did with the surfer, and we do get a little bit of blur, it's okay because it shows motion. And motion's a really nice thing to have in the photos. It doesn't necessarily detract, unless the whole image is motion. But in this case, the bird's body, the beak, the color look fantastic. It shows really well with that mustardy, yellow, brown, blue, green colors. The beak has this kind of nice saturated orange or reddish orange, maybe even a little bit of pink. The wings, on the other hand, are the one thing that's blurry. See that slight movement. But as an artist, as a photographer, I don't think that that's enough to classify the photo as bad or not good. Don't be afraid of blur, especially in the very beginning as you're learning how to shoot. Don't be afraid of shooting and making mistakes, because that's the only way that you learn. Long exposure exists on these cameras too. By going to long exposure within your shutter screen or shutter priority options, you can now let the camera stay open for multitudes of seconds or minutes to capture the kind of beauty of the overall image without losing quality. For example, you can see these green shrubs and all of this nature foliage behind the waterfall. It's vibrant, it shows off different greens. You can see the moss growing in on the rocks on the right side, some dead leaves, flowers down below as well too. All of that is not moving. The water is. The water is just going to create this halo or blurry effect. But you're still left with a clean, classic image. Now to sum it up a little bit more. Shutter speed. The faster you go, the higher the number, the faster the camera is going to go. The lower the number, the slower it goes. Now the flip side.
Saxon, do these smaller cameras have a shutter speed setting?
That's all in the mode dial.
Oh, okay.
All under that mode section, you'll be able to see it. Next time, just interrupt if you have a question.
Oh, okay.
Just let me know.
Sure.
But yes, every camera, as long as it's not, honestly, I think every camera, even the iPhone has it, and Samsung phones have the ability for you to change the shutter on there. At this point now, every camera for the most part has this. I've maybe early models of cameras wouldn't, but for the most part, there's no reason that these don't.
Fascinating.
So, the faster we turn our shutter speed, though, the darker the image is going to be. And why is that? Because we're not letting as much light into our physical camera unit. The slower we go, the brighter it will be. But now keep all of this in the factor of, if we have a fast-moving object, and we do a slow shutter, we're going to get a blurry image. If we do a faster shutter, it'll be darker, but we'll get, hopefully, a freeze frame on the image. It's not a bad trade-off, but again, managing your expectations and making sure that you set things up appropriately for what it is you're trying to do will go a long way. Why use something like shutter priority? I think this photo is a good one. I had a customer send this to me once, told me their camera wasn't working properly. It really comes down to the fact that shutter priority is going to help you get pictures like this, but better. And it sounds silly to say, but I think a lot of us will have kids or family or just things that are fast, they're quick. And if we're using automatic on our camera like this customer was, then we're going to get these images that don't show the movement so well. It just shows the blurry nature of the picture. Taking that time to learn shutter priority is a great option. And much like aperture priority, where your only focus is the foreground and background, the portraits, shutters are great because it's focused only on the speed, on the movement of the photo, and not necessarily all of the other settings that are required. That's why I like priority mode so much, because it really gives you that ability to just play with one setting, understand it, play with the other setting, understand it, and then possibly move into manual control, which we'll talk about a little bit later. ISO or ISO is next. For those of you not old enough or maybe not in the know enough to remember, back in the day, film photography was the main bread and butter of the photography industry. Nowadays, digital is king, and even more so the phones, all of these other smaller cameras do a really great job taking photos. In the case of ISO though, when you would go to buy film for your film camera, it would have a number on it. It would say Kodak 400, Ilford 300, so many different options, but it had a number associated with the camera. That number was a continued number that would be throughout the entire time you were using that roll of film. So if you had a 35mm film, you load up a roll in there, you're probably going to get about, I don't know, 19, maybe, or sorry, 20, 30 frames per roll, depending on how big and how much you're recycling everything. Those are great options. However, just having the one on there makes it kind of difficult, because now you can't pick and choose what you want. With these new modern day cameras, with mirrorless or DSLR, you can shoot a few images with 100 or 200 and then bounce up to 400, 800. The flexibility is great. You're making your sensor more sensitive towards light. In darker situations, having a higher ISO is typically better, because you'll really be able to get the full color spectrum out of your photos a little bit easier. In the case of having a lower ISO, you're not letting your sensor be too sensitive to light. So for indoor shoots or places that have maybe good lighting, you probably don't need anything too high. But for nighttime photography, for midday photography, overcast, indoors, using something like a 200, 400, or 600 might be more beneficial. Here's another example. At ISO 100, we have a very dark image. It's brooding, but we can't see anything other than a little glimpse of the rainbow. At 1600, we have more information in front of us, and we can still see the rainbow in a good effect and good color. 800, a little bit better, and I would say the three worst are the 100, 400, and 200. ISO also equates to noise, and it's important to keep that in mind. A lot of people will go out and they'll start shooting, they'll be jacking their ISO up, and before you know it, it's just not right. These images come out and they look like they're grainy, or they're just too much, chattery. That's because you've turned your ISO up way too high, and now the camera itself is taking too much in. Therefore, it's going to start to look like this. In well-lit situations and in bright situations, using a high ISO is probably not recommended. Darker settings, better for that. Auto ISO is one of my favorite tools, and for the most part, I keep it on all my cameras. The way you can look at ISO is it's the sensitivity to the light. I had a mom who came in and I was teaching her some of these classes, and I remember one of the things she asked me towards the end was, it was her senior kids' prom weekend or homecoming, one of the two. She wanted to be the mom photographer. Well, she came in, we started talking, she goes, I'm going to be bouncing from outdoors to indoors, from outdoors to indoors. And I told her switching over to something like the auto ISO might be a great option for you, because now instead of you having to sit there and worry about, you know, what settings you're using, or, you know, how can I change this because I didn't get the image the first time, you let the camera do the work for you, which in the long run should help you produce more images to then go through and decide what's good, what's not good. So to review, aperture priority is our ability to take pictures and focus either on the foreground and the background, or just the foreground itself. Shutter is our ability to capture moving objects or things that aren't standing still or aren't slow. And ISO is our way to create more sensitivity towards our camera, but too much ISO will give us graininess or blurriness, and we don't want to see that. So pick your battle wisely with this settings. Practice it, it doesn't hurt at all, and it gives you the information you need as a photographer. Alright, a couple more settings, we'll look at some photos, then we'll call it a day. Exposure meter. Exposure meter is your ability to change the exposure of your camera. Now, I like to remind people all the time that the exposure is not necessarily referring to your, what's the term I'm looking for? It's not referring to the light, it is. It's not referring to your ISO, it's not referring to your sensitivity. It's taking the overall image and making it darker or lighter. Where that matters is because the exposure is what's going to then basically give you the ability to make your whole image light or your whole image dark. Why that would matter to you is if, let's say, you're taking photos and you've set your ISO to what you want it to be, it's still not light enough or still not dark enough, now you can go in and take your exposure meter and turn it one way or the other. Positive numbers, the plus, will raise the exposure, making everything brighter. Negative numbers, the minus, will lower the exposure, making it darker. So it's really up to you as you're playing with it to figure out what exactly you're looking for and how exactly this could affect you, unless you haven't played with other things like your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter. That might be the next thing to do first before jumping into the exposure. Now, light metering gets a little more complicated in there, but I like to look at this as like a side of a painting. I studied fine arts in college. I had a concentration in painting when I was doing it, and one of the things that really blew my mind were artists like Caravaggio, for example. Caravaggio, when he would take and paint, he would have, say, a candle. The candle would be the center of the painting, and the light would illuminate from the candle, but his way of capturing light was so beautiful. And I think that can be also used when we talk about light metering. Light metering is a great way for us to take the light that's there and now have it filtered through the camera sensor to maybe give us more dramatic image, or a brighter image, or a more lighthearted image, or maybe a very hard to see image too, depending on how good our lighting is. Every camera has a few extra ones or does some different things. But the three most popular that you're going to see are multi, which looks at light from different points of the sensor. Center looks at light from the middle and radiating from it. Spot, only from the center portion of the sensor. And if you're shooting Canon or Sony, you might see the entire average or partial. Entire average takes the entirety of the sensor and just moves around from there. Partial takes the outer rim of that center shot, or multi-shot, and then just kind of hones it in a little bit more. Again, no one answer for how you should be setting your camera. White balance. Now, white balance is another one that I don't talk too much about with a lot of people, but I like to bring it up in this because it is something that I did change when taking that photo I showed in the beginning. White balance takes one of the most constant colors you're going to see in all of just kind of everything that you do, which is white. White is seen everywhere. It makes colors lighter. It changes, but white has a dramatic effect where certain lighting patterns will have an effect on how we perceive white. So what we can do in our camera settings is actually play with the white balance presets. For example, we can see by looking at the chart above the image that the more blue things go, the colder they get, the more dead they get. The more then towards the left side, we get into more of the brighter colors, the red colors, the orange, the yellow, which has more of a flame or an alive color. So for things like, let's say, shading, for buildings that are partially covered by shade, or maybe you're in a dark place, or fluorescent lighting, cloudy lighting, going towards something that's more incandescent might be a great option when switching through your different light exposure or your white balance presets. Going something on the brighter side where you have warm tone colors or lighter colors, well then that's where you should probably be looking at more of your your fluorescent lighting. These are all good ways to help you manipulate the photo without having to do too much on an aftermarket app. I don't have to sit there and go to Photoshop in order to get the color I might want out of something, when I can simply just set the camera up to take the picture that way and then play with it later if I so choose to. But auto, a simple fail-safe mode for snapshots, but the white balance may vary from one shot to the next. You may not get the colors you expect. Incandescent, this is the closest match for regular domestic lighting and will correct the color more effectively than auto white balance. Fluorescent, this comes in many different types. Currently DSLRs offer no fewer than 7 alternates. So some trial and error might be needed for this type of setting. Bright sunlight, cloudy, shade, Kelvin, and then pre, which is really nice because that's something that you can customize and switch yourself. I won't read all of them. You obviously can go back and watch this video later on, or you can take a photo of the screen if you prefer. But white balance is a really nice way of playing with, again, the white and how it reads in your photo. It could drastically alter it, like we see with the purple and the blue, but it also could make things better, like we see with the middle photo, or even the photo off to the right that shows the flash. Now, I showed and I talked about all this stuff, but full manual control is what we're building up to here. Why? Because full manual control gives us the ability to use our camera as a tool in order to get the best shots possible. Full manual gives us control over both aperture and shutter speed. We can also control things like ISO and all of the other things I listed. Light metering, exposure compensation, your ability to change your white balance. All of those different settings and features that are available to you on your camera can be easily accessed through full manual. Now let's look at some images and see how we're getting these. And I like to use this as an example tool of there is no one right answer. Everyone can look at these photos and identify them in a different way, something that maybe brings to light, whatever it is you're looking at, but it'll at least maybe help you get a better understanding for how I see things and how I relate that to photography. So without further ado, we have this beautiful bridge that overlooks or goes in between 2 buildings. The buildings are very dark lit, but nice and bright. They have fun little light contrast with there. I would say that aperture-wise, the background and foreground aren't completely blurred out, but they're not completely together. So there's still a little bit there. If 22 is the highest, then we'll say f1.4 is the lowest. I probably would give this closer to f18, maybe f20, maybe f16.
So they let a lot of light in.
They did not.
Oh, they did not.
No. So the smaller the number is, the more wide our aperture is.
Oh, okay.
The more light we're letting in, and the more we blur the background out and focus in on whatever the subject is.
Okay, so the aperture number, the higher the number, the less light. Okay, that thanks.
So, but to compensate for that, they turn the ISO up higher, and where you can see that is the windows of the building. How much light is coming out of there, and how it almost feels like it's radiating out of those buildings like a mad scientist lab. It's because of the fact that the ISO was turned up so high that it helps compensate for the fact the aperture was where it was. Shutter 2, I can't imagine there's a lot of movement here. However, if there was movement, then I think that they froze it in an appropriate manner, but I'm going to still lean on the caution they probably didn't. So I'd say 1/250th of a second, if not 1 1/100th of a second, would be more than enough. Here we have some cherry blossoms. Now again, let's start with aperture. If we look at this one, we can see the cherry blossoms in front of us clear as day. If we look behind the cherry blossoms, we can still see a tree full of them, but we can't make out full details of which ones are budding, which ones aren't, etc. So I probably would say that this is closer now to your f6, f7, maybe a 2.8. As far as shutter is concerned, unless these things are moving vigorously through the air, you're probably not looking at a fast shutter. I probably would say something around 1 in 100, maybe 1 2/50ths of a second. Again, slower unless the wind is very violent or something shaking this tree and you just got a beautiful snapshot. And then lastly, let's talk about the ISO. It's a beautiful sunny day. I would probably say about 100 ISO.
So not very sensitive to the ISO.
No. I mean, if you have a lot of sunlight out there and a lot of brightness, probably don't need to have it that high. Alright, so here we have 2 firemen. This is probably a staged photo, so I don't think that the shutter on this is going to be fast. Probably something closer to 1 in 100, maybe 1 in 2/50th, maybe 1 in 500th of a second, but I don't think it even needs to be that fast. Now, if they're moving, different story. Could be 1 in 500th of a second, could be a little faster. Now, this is similar to the dog photo that we looked at the very beginning. You can see that there is another fireman behind him. You can make out the cloths, the materials, everything else. You can't see where they're staring. Most likely staring at the camera here. However, we don't necessarily know. So I'm going to say that our aperture is probably 2.8, maybe a little higher than that. Because you can tell, but you can't tell. And then shutter being the last one. Again, not a lot of movement. I don't see grain on this image. So I'm looking over and I'm trying to see, do I see intense lighting on like areas like this where there might be some freckles or noise, and I'm not. The collar here looks really good. The color overall looks really good. So I'm going to say that ISO is also pretty low, but because of how weird and funky this lighting looks, because I can almost imagine with the lights that we have here, this is probably going to sit somewhere at 400 ISO. Maybe 600, but no higher than 8. I would probably say no higher than 6. Here we have the ram. A lot of beautiful color on the ram. The horns look great. The fur, the eyeball has a texture to it. But we start with aperture. We can clearly make out the ram. When we look at the background though, it definitely looks a slight blurry, slightly not quite all there. However, you can see the snow, the tree. So I probably would say that for an f-stop, that's probably somewhere close to 8, maybe middle of the road, slight blur, but still can make out what's there. As far as the goat goes, or the ram, you can see the texture and the color on the horns, but if you look at the darkest portions of it, the ISO is kept low on purpose. The lighting in here isn't very good, but for whoever was taking this photo, the lighting was perfect enough for them they didn't need to add anything else on. So in that case, I probably would say that the ISO is, or sorry, the ISO is probably at, I'd say probably like about a 250, maybe 400 at the most. And shutter speed, this is where I always joke. I don't know if it's a moving goat or if it's a like stuffed one like you'd see at the Field Museum. So in that case, I can't say on the shutter, but I can't imagine that thing's moving too quickly unless you upset it. So I'd say maybe 1 and 250ths of a second, 1 and 200ths of a second. I think would be fast enough. Maybe a little faster, but I highly doubt it. You got two dogs catching frisbees. Both are going to be shot at least 1 1,000th of a second or faster. The lighting outside is very bright, very sunny, so probably 1 100 ISO. And aperture, if you look at the backgrounds, the trees, the car park that's behind the dog on the left one, and all the other trees, they're blurred out big time. They're focusing just on the two dogs. So I probably would say that these guys were shot at a 1080 or possibly 4K. Now we have our football player jumping into the end zone, trying to score a touchdown. We can clearly see that there's motion involved in this. We got two different blockers behind them, and then the football gentleman scoring the touchdown. So overall, we're probably looking at a little around that 1 in 1,000 speed. Where the last image I was more looking at the definition of it, I was more thinking of the ISO. My brain escaped me there for a second. The ISO on both of those images is probably about ISO 100. The actual then aperture on the other images would probably be closer to that 1.4 to maybe 2, where you're blurring the background out. I can't really make it out. In this image's case, I do agree. I think that the speed is 1 in 1,000. I think that the ISO is probably about 100. But I would say as far as this image goes, you're probably looking at something closer to an ISO of, aperture of, I'd say a little higher than 8, possibly 8 or 16. The only reason being is you can clearly make out the number of that jersey on the one gentleman standing up still. It's a 6 or an 8 based on that rounded part. You can also see clearly that the guy missed the tackle. He's laying on the ground. So I can't really say that the aperture would be too high, such a number that it would blur everything out. But it's not too high where I can't, see the people there. Now, learning your camera is only the start. Anyone can learn to use a camera. I can't stress that enough for you guys. It's fantastic you're taking my class. I love when customers call in, they ask questions, they bring their stuff into me so I can see it. But I will say this much. Going out and actually taking the images, participating in photo walks, or just constantly being a forever student of photography is a huge, huge, huge thing to be a part of. It's not quite enough to just sit there and learn the camera because you wanted to, pick something up or you're kind of getting into it. You gotta practice with it. It could be simple, but I have a list of what I think are some of the best ways to get better at them. Practice is always first. Whenever I buy a new lens or a new camera, I'll go home and I'll set up a still life in my house. It could be right in my kitchen. I'll put it on the dining room table. I'll put things up like a can. I'll take fruit, I'll put it out. I'll find something with a shiny material, put that out. Something matte, something black, something white, something super colorful. I'll throw 5 or 6 items into a pile, and I'll practice taking pictures and just changing the settings ever so closely and small to then get the image I'm looking for. Classes are great too. We got my class. Next week we'll have another one. We'll be doing advanced photography, which relies more on photo editing. However, though, there are so many classes out there. You can take Oakton Community College as a class too, where you don't have to you don't have to study to get a degree, but you can do a non-accredited class to learn more about how to take photos and what you can do with that and how to get better. I still think that YouTube is one of the best resources out there for any photographer, for anybody in general. If you can't find a video of somebody teaching you how to do it on YouTube, you probably shouldn't even be looking this stuff up. And then lastly, workshops and travel. If you are getting on a plane and going anywhere and you don't bring your camera with you, I think it's shame on you. Bring it with you, practice with it out there. That's the best time to use it. If it's too complicated, too overbearing, yeah, then take your phone out and take photos with it. But at least make the attempt. You're probably not going to regret it. And workshops are great too. There are a lot of customers that come up to me and tell me that they're doing a workshop somewhere else in the country or in Europe or wherever it is. They'll go for a week. They'll meet an artist who is, specializes in XYZ photography styles, and they'll actually get to learn their practices and the best use cases for how that artist does what they do. They'll learn more about the camera itself. They'll learn about photography in general, and they'll get really nice knowledge and practice in that'll hopefully benefit them as their journey continues. Now, recommended accessories. I like to show this at the very end, but I always tell people the same thing. I only recommend you buy the top 4 parts of my list. It's all recommended, but if you're really just trying to get into this on a budget, and you're like, I don't know what I need, here's what I recommend. Get a bag. Protect your camera. You spent anywhere from $50, $60 all the way up to multiple thousands on this thing. Protect your investment. An extra battery and a memory card go a long way. They're fairly inexpensive for the most part, but if you go somewhere and let's say you didn't charge the battery or your memory card fails on you, you'd kick yourself if now you had to either go back and get it or you had to scrap the whole project altogether. Lens cleaning kit. Do not use your shirt, your t-shirt, your sweater, your underwear to clean a camera lens. Buy a lens cleaning cloth. They're fairly inexpensive. I wear glasses myself. I have 1,000 of these things laying around. Take it out, polish off the lens. That'll help in the long run. It's marry the lens, date the body in the camera world. The lens is going to be the big driving factor of how good your photos can be. Your body's the workhorse that then helps capture it, but it starts with the glass. So take care of your glass. Then buy a camera strap of some sort. Make sure you're having a camera strap on there or a wrist strap, or if your camera is super small, can't fit any of that stuff, then yeah, put it into a bag or a case that has a strap. It's a great idea. Lastly, you've got tripods. They're great for stability. If you have shaky hands, you get shaky photos. We've also got external hard drives. That's a great way to save your images and make sure that those get saved onto a unit. Polarizing filters are great, and ND filters are great. If you have a camera that can take those items, they'll help cut through light and reduce glare or shine. And then additional lenses, which we talked about last week of how to understand that and what to look for. Those can all be super important and great to have. That is all I have for you guys. I kept it a little under an hour. We started at 5:30. We're at 6:19 right now. But again, next week we're going to have another class. It'll be our 3rd Thursday of the month, which will be advanced photography. In advanced photography, we're going to be looking at photo editing and then the basics of taking a good photo. What all goes into that and what I recommend for beginners. We're then going to talk a lot about videography and content creation, accessories that could benefit you from that, but just terminology and things you should always keep in mind while shooting. That will be next Thursday, and the date for that, let me pull this up. April 17th will be our advanced photography. I'll stay on for as long as probably another 10 minutes if nobody has any other questions for me. Feel free to ask them. I'll answer them out loud for you. In the meantime, anything that you got for me?
Yeah, Saxon, I got a couple silly questions.
Sure.
The first one is, how do I correctly wrap this? Is there a way to do it like a bow, like it comes in the store, or is? I know it's a lower end and not expensive. I just don't want to like.
You're not really gonna risk anything with the cable.
Right.
I mean, for me personally, what I would just do with it is just take it and follow the pattern that's already there.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then when you get to the end, sometimes what I'll do is go inwards and inwards. It's not that it's a lower end cable. There just isn't one wrong way or a right way with it. Some people will buy cable wraps to then put around the cable, so that way when they tie it up, it looks nice. So.
And what does the histogram mean? That's the white thing. It looks like
the histogram is like a little mountain shape.
Yeah.
That's your balance, and I talk a little bit more about that in the advanced photography.
Oh, okay.
But the histogram is your ability to see like your peaks and valleys on midtones, blacks, and whites.
Okay.
So it's basically on the left side of your camera should be the whites, on the right side of the camera is the black colors, and on the middle is your midtones.
Okay.
That's just a way of showing you how balanced light is throughout your whole image. It doesn't necessarily mean much.
Oh, all right. Okay.
It's not necessary, if you will, and I'll show examples of that next week on what an unbalanced histogram can look like and why I don't think they matter that much.
Oh, okay.
But it's a nice learning tool.
What else was I? Sorry. Can I get your card?
Yeah, I should have one. Yeah.
Does anyone help? Oh, awesome. Okay.
Now, typically the online viewers, every once in a while, I'll have somebody, but they usually let me know ahead of time that they're going to be on there and that they're going to probably ask me questions.
Okay, great. And I know you want to get home.
Oh no, I'm going to be here till about 8 o'clock tonight, so you're totally fine. Ask whatever you like.
So, I guess my biggest challenge sometimes is just so I like the manual mode a lot because some of the stuff I had been exposed to. Are you a big fan of auto flash?
Yes and no. It depends. I don't really put a lot of flash on my photos.
Okay.
Only because my cameras are good for low light photography. I like the auto flash though because what it'll do is it'll recognize your subject, right? If it senses that it needs the flash, it'll then hit the flash for you, so that way it brightens up your image.
Okay.
But if it doesn't need it, then the camera will stay dark, so that way you don't overexpose your image.
Okay.
So it's really dependent on where you're at. The nice part is that you can turn the flash on and off though from in the settings.
Okay, because like I said, I'm still getting to know the camera a little bit.
Yeah.
I must say that example you brought up of the mother with the prom, that's the most practical example.
Yeah.
One of the most practical examples I've heard in whether it was school or training classes at work. It really stuck with me.
Yeah. It's the automatic ISO is really nice because again, if you're going to go in and out from different venues or different places, and that's what she was doing. They had one photo shoot in front of somebody's fireplace at this kid's house, and they went to a golf course and took pictures in front of a fountain or in front of some really nice little space. So they were indoors, outdoors, the lighting, the environment changed. So using the automatic ISO was great because it allowed for them to not have to worry about it and then just go back and forth.
Okay, all right. I don't think I can make the class next week.
Okay.
All
of these are streamed on YouTube. So if you go onto the Apple Electronics YouTube page, you'll see all of these there.
Oh, okay. You mean, are they like recorded, if you will?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Because I want to come back in person for the basics one.
Yeah.
Just,
I would also say I'm off Tuesday, Wednesdays. It's on the card.
Yeah,
Come in any day that I'm working, and I'm always willing to sit down and help you talk.
oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah, of
'cause
course.
Like I said, I'm gonna probably give this one to my wife next year.
Yeah.
And buy something a bit more advanced if we do this safari.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. And you recommend an SD card reader versus
I think
a
so.
cord?
Yeah, that'd probably be your best bet. But if you just want to do the cord and you don't want to do that, Apple does make an adapter that'll go USB-C into the computer and then comes out the female USB, and then you can plug that cable in. So they do make those adapters.
Yeah.
So you can go either one.
I think I want to do that one rather than the card.
Yeah.
Just because if I take the card out too much, I can see myself breaking it or
Sure.
something. And if I get a new computer, I just think it's a little more practical, maybe even with some of the phone stuff
Yeah.
sometimes. So, let me grab one of those if you have one. So, well,
Which one?
thank you so much.
Hey, anytime. One of my guys downstairs will be able to take care of you.
Also, do you have a contact here who is good with iPhones? It's time for my wife and I to upgrade iPhones.
Yeah.
Is there someone you like?
Your AT&T?
AT&T, and
Yeah.
I have the ARC plan because I'm an old man.
Not an issue. Yeah, come on in whenever you're ready. Myself or any of my colleagues can take care of you down there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just I would come in. All of our guys are trained, so really it just comes down to who's available
I didn't
for you.
know if the store if the people on the sales floor were specialists, so to speak. Like,
Yeah.
like the appliance guys, you never see on that side of the store.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, all of our AT&T guys, they're all in that same. All of us are trained on how to upgrade and do all the phone stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll take care of you on that anytime.
Okay. Well, let me just lock this up.
Hey, take your time. I'm just gonna open this door for you. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate having you.
Thanks. I want to come back some more.
Yeah, of course. I'm always happy to help.
Because we travel a lot. Oh, yes, I know what I wanted
What
to
else you
ask
got?
you. Yes. Do you know of a good, preferably free, editing system? Like, for example, I have this picture.
Mhm.
I'd like to edit out
Yeah.
the security man in the background.
Yeah, of course.
Just because our jackets match, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
sort of a strange.
I'm a Grateful Dead fan, so seeing Trey's fun.
Oh yeah, I've met him. I've met Phil Lesh. I've met
That's awesome.
Mickey Hart.
So
I
it's
forgot my camera when I met Phil Lesh. So
Yeah.
go figure.
it's tough with that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. There's
10%.
not much that's gonna be free,
Okay.
especially when it comes to trying to edit that stuff out.
Okay.
Adobe is going to be your best bet. They've got that new AI feature where you can literally just circle it and then hit that you want to get rid of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But you can always look. I know nothing that's going to have that ability that'll be free.
Even Google isn't free for that.
Yeah, for the most part, unless you have a
Okay.
Google phone or a
I mean, I
Samsung.
love the picture.
Yeah.
And the guy was very nice because he let that happen.
Yeah.
Security man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So.
But yeah, I would say try looking at Photoshop because you can get a free trial. And at least do it for like 30 days, and then just cancel it right away.
Okay.
But that'll be able to do it. It'll be Photoshop, and they have an AI feature. You circle it, you'll type in the search bar, remove man from photo.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yes, I was lucky to get that picture of me and Trey. I couldn't get tickets to the concert, but I got that.
All right, there you go. That's exciting. I'm jealous.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to see the Dead in the Sphere in April, so or
Yeah,
May.
we want to go. It's since they're doing more and more shows, the tickets are out there. It's just the expense of it.
I know.
And I'm not complaining about it. And it's hard to. Have you been in there yet?
Not
It's-
yet.
So everyone's got an opinion of the place, and that sort of crowds you. Some people will say, yes, pay the money to be higher up for the full experience. Then there's the people who want to see the. I just don't know. And what I don't like is that there's obstructed view. I don't know how that's possible in a sphere.
Well, it's there, so they'll warn you on there. There's tickets where, and this is where I found out with it. The nice part is that you can literally search your tickets online, and they'll show you exactly where you're sitting in there. People have so many photos from this and have the exact seats and everything. The obstructed view, there's a section that goes underneath. So it would basically be you've got the people who've got the whole view, and if I'm standing here, there's like maybe underneath me a little section that you can go to. Those obstructed views are cheaper. But that's the only issue is that you can see the band, you just won't be able to see the whole encapsulating sphere.
Okay, well, I'll have to pick up some overtime.
Yeah.
So, I'll do that. I have no interest in seeing the Eagles there.
Yeah,
And I don't have no interest in seeing Kenny Chesney.
Yeah, no, I would.
I don't think the music, the Eagles' music could be visual,
Sure.
but they're not using the right visuals from what I've seen.
Yeah.
There's only so many images of a desert road.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So.
The Grateful Dead are meant for that place. It works very well
Yeah,
for
the
them.
Dead and Company. Yeah. Oh, I have a great picture of Matt Mayer from when I saw the Dead and
Very
Company.
nice.
Yeah, where did I see them? At Wrigley Field. So where am I? Pictures of them. So, first first year I went to see him at Wrigley Field, I did that silly shakedown shoot. That was a waste of time.
I still like going to shakedown, but yeah, I get it.
Well, no, it was just a waste because it was all these paid vendors and they only let you walk in like a few minutes. It was dumb and I wasn't going to buy anything anyway. So, the second year, since they really don't have a backstage at Wrigley Field, it's one of the houses that the Ricketts own.
Yeah.
And you go and you wait. So I got this picture of Mayor.
Oh, very nice of him coming out.
Yeah, that's Mickey Hart. I
Yeah,
met him
of
a long,
course.
long time ago. Terrible sound at Wrigley Field unless you're on the floor, on the field. So,
It's awesome though. It's good.
It's being the CEO where I work with United.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's awesome. What are you working for? What do you do at United?
I'm an aircraft router.
Oh, okay.
In a building in Arlington Heights.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I do that. We travel, my wife and I. So we got back from Cancun yesterday.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
yeah.
we jump on the planes when we can.
Exactly. It doesn't hurt that you work for United, so I'm
Yeah,
sure
we
we
did
do stuff there.
This year, since COVID, COVID threw us off a lot.
Sure.
So, this year we did Costa Rica, Guatemala, and then we just went to Cancun to relax for a few days. In 2 weeks, we'll probably go to maybe Vietnam or somewhere.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I
Thanks.
hope everything works out with the camera. And before you leave, please, any questions you got, please ask.
Yeah, I have your card, and I might be in on this Saturday or the next to grab you, because and I'll bring my wife for that, because we got to talk iPhone upgrade.
Yeah, by all means. This Saturday I won't be in, unfortunately, but I'll be here throughout the week, so we're going.
Do you know if you'll be in May? The only reason I ask is we're going to be around the suburbs in May.
Let's see.
May 10th. We have to go to a bat mitzvah, so in the morning.
I am going to be out because I'll be in Vegas to see the dead May 7th through the 10th.
Okay, that's
So as long as you come in that before that day, so May 1st through the 6th, you'll see me here.
That's fine. Thanks. But I'll probably call you ahead of time.
Anytime.
All right, thank you again.
Hey, anytime. Be safe.
Oh, who should I ask for the adapter?
Just go downstairs to the small electronics department, right by the fish tank there, and just ask them for like a USB A to C adapter, and just show them the cable that you want to plug it into your MacBook. They should.
USB A to C.
Yeah, you know what? Even better, go to the Apple section. Go right into those guys, and just say that you show them the cable you have, and just say you want to put it into the new MacBook, and they'll know what to recommend.
Old MacBook. Yes, thank you.
Anytime. right, well, it doesn't look like anybody has any other questions for me today. So I appreciate everybody for coming out. As always, I teach these every Thursday. If ever I can't, we try to do our best to make sure people know. We send out a little memo. I know I wasn't here last week, but we will be here next Thursday from 5:30 to 7 or 5:30 to 6, depending on how many questions I have to answer. But my name's Saxon. I'm your camera host. I do this every week, and I hope you guys learned something from it. I'll see everybody next week, April 17th, for our advanced photography class. I can't talk today. Everybody have